Hey everybody, Andrew Scheps here, and welcome to this walkthrough video of my new SoundFlow app, the Scheps Color Deck. And here it is on the screen in all of its colorful glory. So, on the surface, this is just mimicking some of the functionality of the Pro Tools color palette, but in fact it extends that functionality quite a bit in some very cool ways. So let me start off with the most obvious things. Most of us use the color palette to color clips or tracks in a session, right? So you can do the exact same thing using the color palette. You can select some tracks, come over here into tracks mode, and then I'm going to color all those that color green. And then I'm going to select this clip, go into clips mode, and I'm going to select, well, let's select a different color, select that color of orange. All right, so that's very much the same as the Pro Tools color palette. Let me just undo, just cause, and show you one thing that's actually quite cool. If you've got your edit selection and track selection linked the way I do, and the way I think a lot of people do, if you're prepping a session, you need to do a lot of track coloring. What usually happens is you select tracks by clicking in the edit window because it's by far the fastest way to select a bunch of tracks. Then you either have to come over and click on the track header of one of the tracks, or come here and manually change the mode of the color palette to tracks to be able to color the tracks, right? Because otherwise, if I undo that, with this selection made here, the color palette is in clips and tracks mode, not tracks mode, so you have to manually flip it over. The Scheps color deck can actually be locked into color tracks mode or color clips mode. So I've made this selection while in color tracks mode, so I can just immediately click on a color and it will color those tracks, even though I've never explicitly gone over and selected a track header. And the same goes for the mode for coloring clips. Right now, I've selected this clip, but I'm in color tracks mode, so I can color its track, or I can say, you know what, I actually do want to color the clip, and come over here and color the clip. So you're explicitly in that mode, and it's sticky in a way that the Pro Tools color palette is not. Very cool, and saves a lot of time while prepping sessions. Okay, now moving on, there are three other modes that the deck can be in. For here, when you're clicking on a color, you're either coloring tracks or coloring clips. But the other things you can do have to do more with how the palette looks at the colors themselves. You can name them. So let's go into name color mode. And let's say you've got a set of colors that you always use for similar elements in a session. I mostly mix music, so I'm going to say this is my drums color. We'll come over here and say this is vocals. And we'll come here and say this is guitars. And now I'm going to go back into the color tracks mode, and I can make a selection of tracks all over the session. We'll do those, and I'm going to color those drums. So obviously, if I know my own colors and I know where they are in a session, it's very simple to just click on a color. But it's a lot simpler to just click on the name. Now, what this lets you do is not only can you give your default names that you like to, let's say, an assistant who's prepping sessions for you, but it also means that you can use colors that are very similar, but you can differentiate between them because of the names. So let's say that I've colored some tracks drums here, and then I've also colored, let's say we've got these two tracks and I'm going to color them like they're percussion. When you look at the screen, there isn't a whole lot of difference between those two colors, but I know which are the drum tracks because they match the drum color. So if I select a track here, you'll notice that the track highlights just like it does in the color palette, and it's highlighting to say, oh, those are drums. And now I know that I've selected drum tracks, whereas if I select these two down here, they're just slightly different. It actually selects a different color. You know those are not colored as your drum tracks. So either they got colored the wrong color, they want to be drums, or they're not drums at all. Now, that may not be the most useful thing in the world the way I just described it, but imagine if you've got lots of tracks that are colored similarly, easy for me to say, but you want to select your drum tracks. You can come over here to the select tracks mode, which I can go right here, and now I can click on drums, and it will find the tracks in the session that are my drum color. That's something you cannot do in Pro Tools, and it's incredibly useful. So let's say you've got a bunch of drum tracks, and then you've got a bunch of auxes around them, and you've got a folder track and a master fader and a VCA, but you want to select the drum tracks because you want to add a send to all of the individual drum tracks. Instead of having to pick through your set of drum tracks that has all these other track types interspersed, you can just go into select tracks mode, and click on drums, and now they're selected, and now you can use Shift Option and assign to send, and all of those tracks will get it. The other thing you may notice, there's also a clear name function here, so I can come here and say clear name, and that will clear the name of that color. But these three modes also at the bottom say Command, Option, and Shift. And what that means is you can leave yourself in color tracks mode and then temporarily enter name color mode, clear name mode, or select tracks mode by holding down the modifier when you click on a color. So I'm just going to undo all my coloring. So right now I'm going to say, well, let me go ahead and select these tracks, and they're going to be base tracks. Oh, but I didn't name my base color. So I'm going to command click this color, and I'm going to say that's base. And then I'm going to say, oh, hold on a second, that's not the right color. So I'm going to option click that to delete it, and then I'm going to command click this and base. And now I can just click, and it will color those tracks the base color. Then I can come over here and be naming other stuff. So we'll say, okay, those are my drums, and here are my vocals. And then, oh, hold on a second. Did I color my bass tracks? I'm going to hold down Shift and click on bass, and it will select all of the tracks that are the bass color. Genius. Makes things very, very quick. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that the way that the deck is able to keep track of what color tracks are is by actually sampling the pixels on the screen. So unlike in Pro Tools, where it will highlight for every color that is selected, even if those tracks are not visible on the screen, this app can only see what is on the screen. So if I scroll these tracks off the screen, it now no longer knows that I've got bass tracks selected. But when you scroll them on, it does. That's the only limitation of the way I'm able to sample the colors. That's also used when I'm selecting the colors. So if you've got all your drum tracks scrolled off the screen and shift-click drums, it's not going to scroll them into view or select them if they're out of view. You got to get them on the screen, but then it will go through and find all the tracks that you're trying to select. Okay, great. So we've now named our colors. We've been able to select based on the names. Then the other thing you can do, obviously you can clear all names, which is this button right here, and I'll just go ahead and do that. Prompt me to make sure I want to do it, is you can actually save sets of names. So I call each one of these a color name, and I call a set of them a name set. I had to call it something, that seemed to make sense. So let's say I'm going to recall a name set. So built into the app is something called color identifiers, which I'll load up in a second, but I've got saved Scheps default. So I'm going to load that, and now here are all of my starting colors for prepping sessions. And I could even extend this and go guitars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I don't really need to do that. I know that I go from guitar 1 to guitar 2, and I kind of go around the green colors for my guitars, so I don't need to be quite so explicit about naming. But this way, I can hand this off to an assistant or anyone else prepping a session for me, and they know exactly which colors I like to use for different instruments. Then if you recall a different name set, all it's going to do is ask you if you want to save the names that are currently displayed, which I don't need to do because I've already got them saved. So I'll say recall, and I can recall a different set. So right now, this is the color identifiers. And this is handy if you're programming in SoundFlow, because these are actually the way SoundFlow talks to the different colors. You've got your dark, medium, and light rows, and then they go from 0 up to 22. So those are the 66 colors in the deck, and here you actually have names for them so you can see. So if you're programming in SoundFlow, this is kind of a handy reference. I can clear all names, and it's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to do that, but it has not cleared the name set. The name set is always here to be loaded up. And I'm going to go ahead and recall a different one. And you can see how quickly you can go back and forth. So these name sets are stored inside of the app. When you close the app, it will reload the currently showing names, whatever those happen to be, whether they're saved or not. And it will also recall all of the sets that are saved inside of the app. And it will also remember which mode you're in. So if you generally like to stay in color clips mode, it's not going to start you off in color tracks mode. It will start you off in color clips, and you can just keep going from where you went. And that goes for all 5 of these modes. It will remember that. So you can recall and save the name sets, as we said. So let me save one just CC. So what I'll do is I will name this Synths 2. And now I'm going to save this name set, and I'm going to save this as a walkthrough video because that's what we did. And now if I recall the Scheps default, what you're going to see is that my Synths 2 is going to go away, because that was only saved inside of the other one. So it doesn't update the set as you go. If you want to replace it, then you need to save it again and give it the same name, and it will ask you if you do want to replace it, and you can go ahead and update a set that way. But then you can also delete them. So I'm going to go ahead and delete our walkthrough video set. Just going to make sure that I want to do that. And now if I go to recall a name set, you'll see that it's gone from the list. And you can search the list. Maybe you've got 70 different color configurations that you like to use, so that's fine. And what that could be useful for is, let's say you're doing post and the first thing is you're spotting Foley. You could have different colors for different types of Foley effects or different characters. Then you're spotting backgrounds and you want to have a totally different set of names for the backgrounds. That's fine, load them up. And then whenever you're working with that particular set of spotting, you could load up the set of names that goes with it, and as you select things on the screen, you'll see which things are being selected on the color palette. Right now, if you want to move to another system, you need to actually export from the application. So you can take whatever names are currently showing and export them as a name set. So that just brings up a file save dialog. You call it whatever you want to call it, and I'll call this walkthrough again. Walkthrough video, why not? And this is saving on my desktop, which is fine. You can save it anywhere you want. And it doesn't affect anything that's inside the app. It doesn't create a name set called walkthrough video. But then if I import the name set, the first thing it says is, do I want to get rid of what's showing? Because it will import it to the app as well as recalling it. So I'm going to say, yep, go ahead and import. And then it will say, hey, what do you want to do? You want to import one of these files, and then I'm going to find my video, my walkthrough video names file. And you notice it is only highlighting the files that are valid. Choose that, and here we go, it's loaded it up. And now if we say recall name set, you notice it's been added to the list. So that's it. Now there are two other things that are going on the color palette that you need to know about. One is there is a service running in the background, which I did talk about briefly, which is how it is sampling the color of the currently selected tracks to then highlight them on the screen. It's also used when you shift click to select tracks. It has to be able to go through and check the color of the tracks. So the color service is running in the background. The way you know it's running in the background and actually active is, first of all, tracks will highlight as you highlight them. And second of all, if you hold down the command key, you'll notice you get new labels for this button and this button. So the first one is the one with my logo on it. If you just click it, you get the current version number of the color deck. But if you command click, it will restart the color service. Now, it's a little weird because you see it come up with restart color service as a label for that button. When that label doesn't come up is when you need to restart the color service. I just didn't want that text showing all the time. It was just a little annoying. So you'll know you need to restart the color service if tracks aren't selecting, and to double check it, just hold down the command key and you'll notice that the command does not come up. If you go ahead and command click that, I'll just show you how it works. So I'm just going to stop the service. So now you'll notice the track highlighting won't update. Now if I command click, it will immediately update because it restarts the service. The other thing that can happen is when you install this on your computer, you may notice that some or none of the colors are actually being recognized on your computer. That's because I'm sampling the color of the pixels as they're displayed, and that can be affected by different color profiles on your monitor. Now, the great thing is it's not affected by things like night shift or anything that's limiting blue light, because those are actually commands to the monitor to display the colors differently. What's important is the color that the monitor has been told to display in the first place, and that is only affected by the color profile as set in your system preferences. So I've set this up for a default color profile that works on my computer, but if you get the app and it's not selecting all the tracks properly, when you hold down command, you'll see that this says calibrate colors. You click on that, and what will happen is there's a utility session, which actually is this session, which has one track of every color. It will download that session to your desktop. If you don't have another session open, right at that moment, it will open the session, go through a calibration routine, close the session, delete the session off your desktop, which is where it saved it to, and then the colors will be calibrated to your monitor and to your color calibration. If you have a session open when you click the calibrate colors, all it will do is it will download the session, but it will say, please close your current session and then click calibrate colors again. I don't want to be responsible for whether or not to save your current session as I close it and reopen it. So for it to work properly, you need to have a session not open in Pro Tools, but it will remind you of that when you click on it. Now, there's one other thing that can keep colors from being recognized, and that is if SoundFlow hasn't been given permission to actually go ahead and color the to record the screen, which is what it's doing when it gets the colors from the screen. So I'm just going to move the palette out of the way. If you open up your system preferences, if it's not able to display the if it's not able to display the correct track colors as you select them, and you've done the calibration mode and you're sure that the color service is actually running, then come into your system preferences, go to security and privacy, scroll down to screen recording, which is going to be in the left side, and you need to be on the privacy tab, and make sure the box is checked for SoundFlow. I've seen on a couple of systems, and surprisingly mostly laptops, what will happen is SoundFlow will be in the list of applications, but it's never actually been granted access to record the screen. And what it ends up doing is it's actually sampling the pixels of your desktop background. So somehow it's allowed to sample the pixels in the desktop, but not the windows above the desktop. So as soon as you enable this, then it will work. At that point, if you've run the color calibration, you'll probably need to rerun it because it's been sampling the wrong colors. And there you go. I think that's everything. So I'm going to stop talking now, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the app. Thanks a lot.